Just wait for that to go through. Perfect. Right, so this is our third interactive webinar, and this will be run by Gary Cousins from BAE Systems Digital Intelligence. So Gary is the Chief Engineer, DSTL and CEMA, which he's going to explain during the webinar. I'll just briefly introduce the programme and I'll give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. If you haven't popped your name and your role in the chat, please just do so before we finish the webinar. That'd be great. And then I'll pass over to Gary to present. So as I'm sure you're all aware, teachers and other educational staff have a real influence on students during school. So we feel it's crucial for key information to be passed on to the educational staff. Things such as entry pathways, recruitment processes, and any challenges and barriers that there may be for young people. So this is a programme which is run nationally, but we've been lucky enough within the council to be able to fund this throughout Essex. So the aim of it is to allow educational staff to be more confident, better informed when discussing future choices with students. So we have a variety of different organisations taking part because we're aiming to gain interest from all different subject areas within schools. So aside from the webinars that are taking place, bear with me, sorry, I think we've got someone joining us. Oh, thank you for letting me in. So aside from these webinars that are taking place, we'll also be running careers carousels and they'll be taking place within schools around the end of April, kind of May time. And then we also have workplace visits taking place and that will be kind of the end of May, June time. As you all signed up on Eventbrite, if you just follow that link again and go to the page, you'll be able to see all the different opportunities that we have coming up. And of course, if you want any more information, please feel free to just drop me a message, an email, and I'll be more than happy to help you. During the session, there'll be plenty of opportunities for questions, so please just pop your hand up or pop a question in the chat and we'll aim to come back to those. We aim to make the session interactive, so please do get involved as much as possible, and there'll also be a chance at the end of the presentation for any final questions that you may have. So I'm pleased to pass you on to Gary Cousins. He's going to inform you on the business and answer any questions that you may have throughout the session. And Gary, if you do want any poll questions, just please do let me know, drop me a message and I'll be happy to put those in the chat.
Okay, right, so first challenge is, can I present? Let's have a look.
Thanks, Laura.
Has that anything come through?
Yeah, we can see that. Thanks, Gary.
Excellent. That's the first hurdle out of the way. So yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Excuse me. It's the first one of these I've done. So please tell me if it's heading in the wrong direction, and I'll change tack a little bit. So as Isabel said, I work for BAE Systems Digital Intelligence. I'd be highly surprised if anybody knows what that is or where we are. So I'll tell you a little bit about that to start with. So BAE Systems itself is a big company, but probably not that well known. This is the kind of blurb from our website. I'm not going to read it out verbatim, but in terms of what we do, we are a defence contractor. We're the largest defence contractor in the UK, and certainly the largest engineering company in the UK, one of the biggest in Europe. We've got about 90,000 staff worldwide, and about half of those are in the UK. In terms of a business, sort of order intake last year was about 32 billion, so it is a massive industry and a massive business. And it works across just about everything, really, but primarily military platforms. So, as I said, it's about 90,000 employees. I know that says 82 up there, but it gets difficult to count people, particularly for joint ventures and things. But the key thing is we've got about 37,000 staff in the UK. So, a big employer in the UK for effectively high-tech engineering. Digital intelligence is one part of that business. So a business that size is split up into all sorts of different bits. So air, land, sea are the traditional bits. So if you've seen the current UK aircraft carriers, they're built by BAE Systems. The Typhoon fast jets are BAE Systems, or BAE Systems contribute to those significantly. Most of the Royal Naval vessels are also built by BAE Systems. So big engineering projects. Digital intelligence bit of the business is about 5,000 people, and that is more concentrating on digital and cyber. So cyber threats, digital threats to networks and equipment, but also has a large electronic systems interest as well. So all the bits of equipment that you would put on those big defence platforms. It's a relatively new bit of the business. It was only formed at the beginning of 2022, so we're just over a year old, and it was made up from existing bits of the business that were brought together just to based on their kind of overlaps in capability and where the company's going. All sorts of interest there, but essentially we support a whole bunch of digital equipment that goes onto defence platforms. So that's kind of slightly smaller than BAE. And in particular, the bit of the business I work in is at Great Baddow in Chelmsford. So within the Essex area, it's a site just outside Chelmsford, Great Baddow, and it's got a very long history of being an engineering centre of excellence. So it was originally acquired, the land, back in 1930 something, and it was acquired by Marconi when he did his first radio transmissions from Chelmsford. He originally was based in central Chelmsford, and he moved out to the outskirts really as the city got industrialised, and it became difficult for him to do his radio experiments with all the power stations and electrification of industry. It was taken over in the war, so a lot of the radar technology from the Battle of Britain was developed in and around the site. So it was turned over to the war effort, returned sort of when that died down. The ministry gave it back. So sort of 40s, it was the GC Marconi Research Centre, and it's been through various names since then. I joined sort of 1990s era as an apprentice, actually, and have worked my way through the various names it's been in up to the recent digital intelligence bit of the or it's digital intelligence name that it is now. Still the same site, still largely doing the same work, and it's primarily a research and design organisation. So we're not building pieces of equipment that go out into service. We're not building hundreds of items. What we're doing is everything from fundamental research into new designs and techniques through to fixing problems that come up with equipment once it's in service, both internally to BAE and for other bits of the defence business as well. So that's kind of the potted history. In terms of what we actually do, this is the sort of stuff we get involved with. So being a research centre, we've actually got a very wide remit in terms of engineering skills, but probably only a few experts in each field. So antenna systems, electromagnetics, so that is collecting energy from the world. Typically that's through your you'd be familiar with things like Wi-Fi antennas and your mobile phone antennas and mobile phone masks and things like that, but everything up to great big dishes that are used for kind of deep space exploration. This is a 36-meter dish, I think, that belongs to the European Space Agency, so right up to that sort of scale. RF systems, so again, anything electronic that wants to communicate wirelessly, so mobile phones again, Wi-Fi, radar systems, Earth observation sensors, weather radar, anything like that comes under RF systems. Fiber optic systems, so that's and free space, So that's lasers, whether it's being fired through a piece of optical fibre as part of a telecom system, or a digital data link, or it's free space optics, so communications or sensing of some sort. We get involved in that. These are some optical modules at the bottom here that go onto a naval vessel. Communication systems in general, so probably our most famous is a system called TTCP, which we sell to the European Space Agency. So you may have seen in the news the Jupiter Icy Moons mission launched last week, I think, from ESA, and the communication to that spacecraft is done through the equipment we provide from the Great Meadow site to ESA worldwide. So real stuff going on there. Mechanical engineering. So again, alongside all the electronics, we run an experimental machine shop at the site. So doing highly complex machining on small scales, right up to traditional kind of manufacturing techniques. Alongside that, we do failure analysis. So we've got chemistry labs, material labs looking at failure analysis, device contamination, counterfeiting, and then failure modes and causes of those sorts of things as well. And then more recently, machine learning and artificial intelligence. So on the software side of things, looking at how these sort of new techniques can be applied to real world problems. So in a software sense, so mechanical engineering, software engineering, lasers, RF, electronics, communications. It's a fairly wide mix of all sorts of things, and it's fundamental research through to prototype systems to go into future product. So it's quite an exciting kind of area of work. It's kept me busy for 30 years, and I haven't got bored of it yet. And it's literally right in the middle of Essex, and yet very few people know it's there. So that's what we do. So a little bit of everything. Anybody with an interest in any sort of STEM-based skill has probably got a home within BAE, and probably got a home within the research centre as well, if they like tinkering with stuff. So that's that there. How do you get in? How do you get into work to BAE Systems? And that is depends where you are really. So thinking locally at Baddow, that research environment, we're looking for people with physics, maths, electronics, computer science type backgrounds. For more specialist skills, we're looking for people that have done masters or PhDs in certain areas, or we're looking for people that have been working in the field for some time. Now, clearly that's not really applicable to a lot of you guys looking at schools, but all the STEM subjects are kind of things we're interested in. If you're looking for sort of slightly wider, so the whole of the digital intelligence business, same sort of skill set, probably more emphasis on computer science, less of the masters and PhD level, because it's just because of the nature of the work wider. And digital intelligence has a footprint that extends both Essex through into offices in London, and then out to west of London, sort of Guildford, and down there, so a little bit wider. Nationally for BAE, all those skills again, plus a lot of manual skills. So if you look to the wider BAE, we are actually producing ships, airplanes, land vehicles, and things like that. So all of the manual skills that go with those, assembly, welding, integration, all come into it as well from a technical sense. And then supporting roles, so like any large business, we have all of the normal human resources, commercial, finance, marketing, sales, legal, IP lawyers, etc. And it's something that's worth remembering. If we have, or if there are people that have got a real interest in science and technology, but not necessarily the aptitude for it, there are still roles for them within the business alongside those technologies, even if it's not what they do themselves day to day. Even if they, if they can't get the STEM subject qualifications, there's still roles for them within these kind of technology businesses. So that's kind of who we employ. Very, very STEM orientated. And how do you get in? So traditionally, we've looked at direct entries. So this is you experienced staff coming in. We've got a massive shortage at the moment. We've got about 1,000 vacancies out across the country. It's probably actually much higher than that. And that's been fairly constant for about 3 or 4 years now, massively short of qualified engineers in the UK. And it's a real problem. Graduates of where we've been looking probably for the last 10 years. The assumption was that we take people after their degrees, and we still take quite a large number on. So 760 graduates entered the business in 2022. So quite a large number. Most as we're looking for, and that will be similar in 2023. We've seen a sharp increase in our interest in apprentices over the last probably 3 to 4 years, at all levels. So we've had the kind of intermediate apprentices for quite some time, traditionally going into the manufacturing bits of the business. We've had the kind of high and advanced apprenticeships going in recently into things like commercial, finance, marketing, and they've been quite successful. And then we've started, well, we should have started a few years ago, but COVID put a little bit of a dent in it, looking at degree level apprenticeships. And we have one running out of the Great Baddow site with Essex University in Colchester. As an experiment, we're just we'll be entering our 3rd year of that next year. So we've got first 2 years running through at the moment with just a handful of people going through to see how it works, and that's looking quite successful. But overall, we're planning on just under 1,000 apprentices in 2023 across the country. I think in 2022 we were the biggest apprentice employer in the country. So we're definitely seeing the value of this. And it's probably worth mentioning, certainly for the degree apprentices, we're certainly looking at that replacing the normal graduate route. We are struggling with graduates coming out of university, and I'll talk a little bit about more later in the challenges we've got. But with the degree level ones, it allows us quite a lot of influence over the course and how they learn. It also allows us to bring those people into the business while they're doing their degree and get some experience at the workplace. And for the graduate, we effectively they get their course fees paid because it's an apprenticeship. Then we pay them a salary on top of that as well. So, and particularly with the one we've set up with Colchester, what we're looking for is trying to encourage local students to take a degree and a job that's effectively local to them, so they haven't got to up and move somewhere. Many of them are still living at home while they're doing a degree, so their outgoings are minimal, their degree's paid for, and they're being paid a salary while they're doing it as well. So financially it's quite beneficial for them. In addition to those full-time roles, we do a normal range of work experience, so placement years for those people doing their degree through a traditional route. It's very difficult to find numbers on those. It's very ad hoc and by site. So I'm taking an apprentice this year, got one started in June for the year. So relatively small numbers, but good experience. Some are internships as well. So for the 3 months over summer, they tend to be again for people doing their degrees or doing A levels. We bring people on for 3 months. Again, both of those roles are paid roles. And then work experience is for the GCSE A level students. And again, that's sort of done site by site basis. We take a handful of those, maybe half a dozen a year at each site, and they're quite highly contested. They're obviously not paid roles, they're just experience, but we do get people working on real stuff when they're in. We're going to start supporting T-levels for this year, apparently. It's news to me, and I don't know quite what form that takes. I must say we have struggled with the T-levels in the last few years, because the commitment to the individual is quite, well, it's quite a lot of commitment to bring the individuals in, and particularly within the defence sector. In order for people to effectively work on site, they have to go through a certain level of clearance, and that costs quite a lot of money and support. So for somebody coming in for work experience for a week, we can get around it with a security waiver. For those people coming in for internships and placement years, the smallest one of these, an internship, is sort of 3 months solid. So actually the benefit we get from them coming in allows us to do that security clearance, but for sort of few days a week or a couple of weeks a year spread out over the year, it's been quite difficult for us to support and justify so far. But if the business is going to start doing it on a BAE scale across the country and standardise it all, that should become an option quite quickly for us. And it's worth saying that all those, obviously, bottom three there have suffered a earlier this year. Excuse me. Since the start of COVID, and we're just starting summer internships and placements again. So it really did hit us quite hard, the COVID. I know a lot of companies went to remote work experience from home, but we kind of felt that didn't really do much for the individual. So we did stop for the entire period, and are just picking up again. So come this year, certainly come next year, all those routes will be available again. At a national scale, but there are opportunities directly within Essex as well. So it all sounds quite good, but what are the issues we have? I said we've got 1,000 vacancies at the moment for direct entry. So we clearly do have some issues with recruiting people at the moment, and it is a massive problem. So applicants in general, there is a shrinking pool of expertise. A lot of the work we do is quite specialist in what it is. A lot of it isn't taught particularly well at university level anymore, or taught at all in some cases. There's a general increase in the demand for these skill sets, both in the defence business and commercially, and everybody wants the best people, wants the same people. So we are seeing there is a big demand, or a big increased demand, for these high-tech engineering skills across the country. And now with remote working as well, actually is even international demand for some of these people. It's much easier to go and move to a foreign company to work, even if it doesn't mean you have to move yourself. So there's a general push or a general squeeze on the engineering population. We have a big problem with gender balance. STEM subjects tend to be male orientated. Certainly when you get to professional level, engineering is still very male orientated. It's largely driven by the degree course selection. So if we're looking for graduates, the percentage of graduates that are female in STEM subjects is quite low. We've got some figures on that in a couple of slides' time. So we see it's male orientated, driven by the course selection. That's almost entirely driven by A-level selection, and at that point it's too late to make the influence then. There's still a lot of gender stereotyping goes on early on in people's careers, we feel, that puts females off engineering kind of disciplines. If you ask most people doing their GCSEs, so school children, what engineering is, most of them think about somebody with a spanner, and it's probably a greasy, dirty profession. They don't think about software engineering or electronics engineering. So quite quickly, people or quite early in school, they get a view of what engineering is. which isn't necessarily correct. That does cause us problems. Image, again, so as I mentioned, what engineering looks like externally tends to be considered, most people consider or think of heavy engineering, and defence in general as well. It generally only makes the papers for the wrong reasons, despite all the good work that's done. So there is a bit of an image problem. And generally, engineering is not considered quite the same way in the UK as it is in the rest of the world. Many other places, engineers are very highly regarded. In the UK, it seems to be less so. So there is an image issue. And then education, or the education system itself, we are seeing less practical subjects coming through, and it's kind of obvious why. A lot of these things require specialist facilities and tuition, which makes them expensive to run. So we seem to see a lack of some of the core engineering skills coming through, and that's all the way through GCSE, right the way through to degree. And there is a sort of concentration on metrics that we see from industry in terms of education. It's all to do with getting the numbers through, and with many things in industry as well, you kind of get what you measure. So if you're measuring the number of students that come out with a good pass, you may start to shy away from some of the more difficult subjects. On the other side, certainly for universities as well, they're very much about attracting funding, research grants again. So while there might be some good tutors, they will tend to teach courses that are going to attract funding, not necessarily what industry's needing, which is still some of the stuff that's been around for many years. So we do see a little bit of a problem with the general approach to the way students come through and graduate, which is one of the reasons we are now looking to apprenticeships, where we've got more flexibility and control over that. Some interesting statistics again with on engineering. So you might be familiar, there's an organisation, Engineering UK, that produces a report every year. A couple of interesting stats from that. So further education consider engineering to be the hardest place to get their qualified teaching staff, which is not surprising. We're 1,000 engineering years short at the moment within the business, as is every other engineering company across the country. So with that squeeze on, how many of them are going to go into teaching? It's difficult. And then even lower down, STEM subjects, most teachers, when you look at them, have probably got an A-level qualification at best. For these things, they aren't necessarily real specialists in the fields they're teaching. You really need to get to degree level for that, and even at those, you still find a lot of postdocs doing the teaching in some areas. But this is kind of a symptom of the fact there just aren't enough engineers in the country anyway. Thought I'd leave you with some positive stuff after all that. So I mentioned the kind of gender gap. What's kind of interesting is kind of two bits here. So it's only about 13% of STEM subjects, or 13% of the applicants or the students in STEM subjects are female, compared to about 50 odd % across all subjects. So there's a real problem, as I said, with females going into these subjects to pop out the other end. What is interesting now, if you look at the postdoc or postgrad population, it goes up to about 26%. So I find that really interesting. Once females get into the engineering stream, they tend to stay there. So it isn't that there isn't an interest. It does feel to me very much like they are not getting in at the beginning. They need to be opening up more avenues to them earlier, and I think that would increase that. because it causes us a real problem if only 13% of the applicant, or if only 13% of the students coming out of university with the right subjects are female. We're going to be very hard pushed to get more than 13% of our engineering population to be female without skewing the recruitment quite severely. So there is some improvement there. We are seeing some improvement in that generally. Ethnic minority representation in engineering is good. You know, it's 28% versus about 20% for all subjects. So we are seeing that coming through. Tends to be Chinese and Asian, Far Eastern students coming through. Some very talented ones there coming along, so that's good. There has been a general rise in engineering degree applicants over the last 10 years. It's raised about 14%, which again is really positive, but it's quite a slow climb. Still not keeping up with what we need to fulfill the need in the UK. So still a real problem for us. But most interestingly is that there's very high employment rates for these STEM subjects. We can see that very well. It's only about 7% of people coming out of engineering courses at degree level that are effectively in the NEET category. There's a good 70% uptake in jobs, and then a huge amount extra onto further education, and there's only quite a small percentage that end up unemployed, which, given there is so many jobs available, is kind of not unexpected. So we can see it moving in the right direction, but at the moment, employment or recruitment is probably the biggest issue the industry faces in defence. Right, I'll stop talking now because that's probably enough, and I'm quite happy to take questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gary. Does anyone have any questions that they can steer towards Gary? Feel free to pop them in the chat or unmute yourselves and ask away. I've noted a few points here as well. Obviously, it is a shame, and thank you for sharing like the struggles that you have facing within the business linked to things like recruitment. Obviously, this is the aim for the encounters, to be able to pass this information out, get people talking about things. So I think that this will be very positive during the workplace visits for the people attending to be able to see it face on. And our aim is to run a project similar to this, but it will be called the Open Doors Project, and it's aimed at students. So the idea will be that they'll be able to come along and be able to firsthand get this information. So as good as it is for the educational staff to have this information to pass on to the students, we're also going to provide an opportunity for students to be able to come and see it themselves. So in terms of things like workplace visit especially, I think it would be great, and obviously we can try and push for female students to attend as well, just so they have a better understanding, because as you said, when people generally think of engineering jobs, it is the kind of male role that they'll steer towards. So it would be great for us to be able to push this on and provide a bit more information on it. Also, just to confirm, so I know you've got you said you had obviously apprentice opportunities and then direct routes into there as well. What is the kind of like, how do they get into this? Is this online that they'll be able to go on and find it quite easily?
Yes, it's so there's there was a link in the I was put a link in the slides, and I'm quite happy that you take those afterwards. So yeah, BAE Systems has its main website. It's interesting to go on it at the moment. I think careers and recruitment is one of the top headline bits on it out of all the things at the moment. There is a careers site. It's run as a national program. So it starts off as BAE Systems. You look at what area you want to go into, and it will tell you where the options are for the sites that you could join and what the routes in are. So you don't have to go looking around necessarily for a particular site or address. and it covers everything from work experience through to direct entries and everything in one go. It's various categories, so you can find that relatively easily. For permanent positions, so anything from apprentice, graduate, or direct entry, it's almost exclusively an online process now. COVID pushed us that way, and we've kind of stuck with it. So typically it will be for apprentices and graduates, typically they will do a video interview. So there'll be some set questions that they can record a response to. There is, I think, for the technical applicants, there's also a couple of questions to approach. One's a coding question, one's an electronics for our bit of the business, which they can have a go of. And then the results come through. We review those recordings and do a down select from those, and then there'll be a face-to-face, an online video interview for them making the selection from. And for graduates and apprentices, we have a certain number we're taking on at any one time, so it is then a competitive process.
Yeah.
We take the ones that we feel we want to. For direct entries, it's slightly different. They tend to put CV in, have an initial half-hour one-to-one interview over the phone, and then we'd invite them back for a full interview, which is probably a couple of hours with a presentation to get through that.
Perfect, thank you. And everyone that's joined us, I will send that over in an email after to you, so you'll be able to have the link directly to pass that on. So thank you, Gary. Laura, did you have your hand up? Is there a question?
Yes, sorry, I was just typing it. I was just wondering, what kind of work is there being done about getting girls into engineering? Are you doing work from like a young age now in local schools, or is it very much ad hoc?
So we're trying to, for quite a few years, we've been concentrating on the kind of A-level students, and we decided that's not working well enough for us. So we're gradually winding back through the school years, getting earlier and earlier. So we've started looking at the GCSE students and at those points, but actually probably going to go back earlier than that as well. I must admit, it's probably not a well joined up program across the country. There are some big STEM activities that BAE organise on a national scale, and they are starting to look at encouraging women into engineering, and then all the local sites effectively look after their own local schools to try and encourage those. So at that level, it does get a little bit more disjointed. But we are trying to get better at that. There are a number of initiatives at the moment for females in engineering, and that's right across from work experience up to direct entries. So there's a number of women in engineering sort of groups within the business that kind of promote that. There are a number of specific STEM activities that go on at a national level to encourage women into engineering. There's particularly one around coding that goes on quite a lot. And again, there's details on the BAE website about how those things run if schools want to get involved or interested in them.
Thank you. And I don't know if everyone's just seen, but Charlotte's just popped a message in the chat. So for schools information, so the Careers Hub are in the process of creating a resource with employers to practice online interviews, and hopefully it'll be ready before the summer, which is obviously really positive because we'll be able to prepare them for interviews that will be run with companies such as BAE. So that's perfect. Right, does anyone else have any more questions? No, okay, no worries. If you do think of any questions and you want to direct them over to Gary, please just send me over an email, and I'll forward that to Gary and we can get back to you on that one. But I think I'll just begin to wrap everything up if no one else has got anything to add. So a massive thank you to you, Gary. You've given us a really great overview of BAE systems, very informative and engaging. So thank you. And of course, thank you to everyone else who's joined us. So this recording will go on our YouTube channel. I will send up a follow-up email after this, as I said, and I'll include any information that I feel relevant. I'll send the link to the YouTube channel as well, just so you can have a look, and then you can have a look onto any of the other webinars that have taken place so far as well. Yes, so as I said, any questions that you might have, if you want to direct them over to myself after, I'll be more than happy to help, or I can pass them on to Gary. So I think that's it. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Gary. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.